started way back in 1998 as a workshop assistant at Design Wood in Yellingup, and I spent the next 5 years training there. Yeah, these are a couple of the first pieces that I made. Now, I thought that 5 years was going to be enough, but this was the chair that made me rethink that. It's by England's most renowned designer, John Makepeace, and I met John by chance in 2003, and it was from that point that I realised that England was going to be the best place to get those skills that I was looking for. It took a few years, but in 2006 I was selected to attend an amazing workshop just south of London called the Barnsley Workshop. Now, some of the world's best designer makers have trained here at some point, and I was really privileged to spend 12 months training there. On the first day, I was told that I'd be making a breadboard. Now, I thought that was going to be easy and I'd have it knocked over in no more than an hour. They handed me a 40mm thick lump of timber and a hand plane, and said that I should start planing until it was 20mm thick and perfectly flat. So needless to say, I finished it 2 days later. Now the beautiful thing about the Barnsley training is that it's progressive. So on the first day they sort of ask you to set aside everything that you know and to completely absorb their way of doing things. So you start with a breadboard and you're guided through a complete spectrum of skills where each one gets progressively more complex. So this was the final piece that I made. It was a jewellery box, and it had some really complex construction based around vacuum forming thin layers of sycamore veneers into the contoured lid shape. And I later found out that this piece had sold at exhibition for nearly $20,000. Now the reason that I put such a high priority on my training as a maker was so that I could ultimately achieve more design freedom. So I think that the technical skill of making feeds into the design process and vice versa. And this was the first piece that I designed and made in 2007 once I returned. Now this table demonstrates the importance of understanding the limitations of timber and then being able to process or re-engineer it and arrange it in ways that you wouldn't normally see or that you wouldn't normally be possible in its raw state. This is one of my best-selling pieces. It's a jewellery box called Fantails, and it's an example of engineering the curved components rather than just cutting them out of a solid piece. And this piece uses a lot of traditional techniques, which includes hand cutting of dovetails. This is my Eclipse Table, and it highlights something that's really important to me, and that is to treat every surface with the same amount of care. So, for instance, in this table, the underside is treated as just as interesting and beautifully finished as the top itself. This was commissioned by a client from Melbourne. It's called the Pirouette Table, and it started off as a limited edition piece, but this one in particular had the top dimension and the height altered slightly so that it fitted a certain place in their home. Now, another way to commission furniture is to have a piece designed from scratch. This was for a dining room suite with a table and 8 chairs and a console table, and it was made from the client's stash at West Australian Shear. Now, the client had chosen the chair that they wanted, and in particular this was the Barnsley Chair that I made in England. And what I had to do was try and recreate not only the look of the chair but the comfort of it as well. And all I had was a couple of rough dimensions, so it ended up being quite a tricky process. So I was pretty much searching for clues, and this is a photo that I took at the workshop of the original chair sitting on top of the working drawing. So I was doing things like zooming in on this photo and making sure that my drawings were matching up with, sort of visually, with the original drawings. So my main concern was to not achieve the original comfort, and the point where I could start testing that was about 8 weeks into the job, so it was kind of too late to turn back and change things if it was wrong. So in a way I was kind of just winging it for a bit. But luckily, experience prevailed, and this was the result. And the comfort of the chairs ended up being one of the highlights of the commission. So that was nice to see. And it was at this point in seeing the chair in 3D that I went about designing the two tables. This is the dining table. Now it's a fairly traditional design, but the chairs actually look quite modern, so the table sort of had to have styling to suit that. And that sort of came mainly in the top, where it's got sort of subtle curved edges, but it's got quite a modern edge profile where it sort of cuts back at 45 degrees. This is the little matching console table. Now the only request from the client was that it have one traditionally made drawer with no ball bearing runners. Now it's a really beautiful way to make a drawer, but it does require meticulous timber selection and really test your skills as a craftsman to achieve the result. This is a progress shot of my current project. It's 5 pieces of furniture to complete a home study fair. And the clients took a really active role in the design process, and it ended up taking over a year to develop and sign off on. So they weren't in any rush to have it made, but they were really committed to achieving the ultimate result. So just lastly, this is a prototype of a chest of drawers, and it's based on exploiting the sculptural properties of timber and revealing something that you might not expect. It's also about creating a first impression that's based on the piece's form as opposed to its function, which is kind of interesting to what I think.